The room is quiet, but Funky's energy is anything but. He leans forward, locks eyes with the camera. And in that brief pause before he speaks, the tension already feels heavier than satisfaction. There is no build-up, no soft introduction, no easing into the moment. Just a blunt statement that instantly stops the internet mid-scroll. He says he told Tamar directly that she was lying. That single line gets clipped, replayed, slowed down, and reposted everywhere. Over and over, users fixate on the exchange that follows. "Are you aware of what really happened to you?" he asks. Tamar's response, pulled from her interview, feels distant. "No, I'm not. I don't know what really happened." The contrast is jarring. On one side of the screen, Funky's jaw is tight. His voice controlled but clearly strained, like someone who has been holding frustration in for months. On the other side, Tamar appears calm, almost detached, explaining that she simply attended a friend's birthday party and has no memory of what happened afterward. She repeats that she doesn't know, that she can't explain it, that she woke up confused. The emotional disconnect between them becomes impossible to ignore. His delivery is sharp, deliberate, and heavy with implication. Hers is quiet, restrained, and oddly serene for someone describing a night she later claimed nearly killed her. The internet notices immediately. Reaction channels place their faces side by side, aligning his intense certainty with her fragmented uncertainty. Comment sections light up with the same question. How can these two versions exist at the same time? Funky's tone suggests resolve, as if he is done protecting feelings and is now focused on correcting a record. Tamar's tone suggests distance, as if the night belongs to someone else entirely. That emotional imbalance becomes the hook. Not because anyone knows the truth yet, but because the energy feels wrong. One person sounds like they remember everything. The other sounds like they remember nothing. And in that gap between his clarity and her silence, the internet senses that something far bigger is about to unfold, setting the stage for a story that refuses to stay contained. From the very beginning, this story is not told as a single account, but as two competing realities unfolding side by side. Funky presents his version like a timeline carved in stone. Deliberate, chronological, and specific, as if each detail matters because it has already been questioned too many times. He remembers who called, where they went, how long they stayed, and what made him uneasy long before anything went public. His narrative moves forward with intention, anchored in sequence and observation. Tamar's version, by contrast, exists in fragments. She doesn't offer a timeline. She doesn't anchor her memories to locations or transitions. Instead, she repeats one central idea. She went to a friend's birthday party and does not know what happened afterward. Her words feel suspended in uncertainty, floating without context or clarity. Funky's account sounds like someone trying to preserve facts before they are distorted. Tamar sounds like someone distancing herself from a night she no longer wants to define. This is where the tension quietly takes root. It is not just about what happened, but about how each person remembers it. Funky speaks with the confidence of someone who believes memory is responsibility. Tamar speaks with the caution of someone who treats memory as danger. As the internet watches both stories unfold, the imbalance becomes impossible to ignore. One narrative grows more detailed with every retelling. The other grows more guarded. Funky explains how his discomfort began early, how certain interactions did not sit right, and how his instincts told him there was more happening than what was being acknowledged. Tamar, meanwhile, maintains emotional distance, her tone steady but vague, her answers circling the same phrases without expansion. That contrast fuels speculation because viewers are conditioned to expect trauma to come with urgency, not detachment. Funky's voice carries frustration, sorrow, and restraint all at once. Tamar's carries calm even when describing a night she later framed as life-threatening. The split narrative becomes the foundation of everything that follows. It creates a fault line where certainty and ambiguity collide. And as audiences begin comparing his structured recollection to her scattered memory, the question quietly forms beneath the surface. If both people lived through the same night, Why do their stories feel like they belong to two entirely different realities? Once both narratives are out in the open, the internet does what it always does best. It intervenes. Confusion does not stay unresolved for long online because speculation rushes in to fill every gap. Reaction channels begin pulling clips from Funky's livestream and Tamar's interview, placing them side by side in carefully edited frames. His expressions are slowed down. Her pauses are replayed. Words are isolated, repeated, and emphasized until they carry meanings far heavier than intended. Commentators start narrating over the footage, pointing out how his jaw tightens when he speaks, how her eyes drift when she says she does not remember. These edits are not neutral. They are persuasive. They guide viewers toward patterns, toward inconsistencies, toward questions that feel impossible to unsee once planted. In comment sections, timelines are built by strangers who were not there, stitching together public statements, live stream timestamps, and interview sound bites as if solving a puzzle. What begins as curiosity slowly turns into doubt. Viewers start asking why Funky's story sounds increasingly precise, while Tamar's remains unchanged and vague. Others question why her interview tone feels so calm compared to the severity of what she later described online. The internet does not wait for clarification. It crowdsources its own conclusions. Influencers weigh in, body language experts dissect facial cues, and fan pages frame their theories as observations rather than assumptions. Each repost sharpens the narrative. Each caption leans a little harder into suspicion. The story stops being about one night and starts being about credibility. Funky's certainty is framed as consistency. Tamar's uncertainty is framed as avoidance. Whether fair or not, that shift happens quickly. The more people analyze, the more confident they become in their interpretations. Silence becomes suspicious. Detachment becomes strategic. And in this digital echo chamber, speculation gains momentum simply by being repeated. What could have remained an unresolved misunderstanding is transformed into an unfolding controversy. Not because new facts emerge, but because the internet decides the existing ones do not align. By the time the clips circulate widely, the audience is no longer asking what happened. They are asking what is being hidden. And once that question takes hold, the narrative changes permanently, setting the stage for theories that grow louder, darker, and far more difficult to control as the speculation intensifies. Funky responds by doing the one thing he believes will cut through the noise. He tightens his timeline. He stops speaking in generalities and begins walking the audience through the night step by step. Not with emotion first, but with order. Who called? Where they went? Why he agreed to show up. He explains that he never wanted to be out that night and that his presence was never meant to extend beyond. Something casual and brief. From the start, he says something felt off. He describes meeting Tamar and her friends, the constant movement from place to place, and how Mendeecees kept appearing without planning, without invitation, as if always nearby. Funky does not frame this as jealousy or competition. He frames it as discomfort, a pattern that did not sit right with him even before anything went wrong. His voice stays controlled, almost clinical, as he explains how he observed interactions from only a few feet away and began feeling like he was witnessing something he was not meant to fully understand. According to Funky, these repeated encounters were not included in Tamar's public version of events. And that omission is what troubles him the most. He says the internet was given a simplified story, while the reality felt layered and uneasy. He recalls moments where he questioned why plans kept changing, why locations shifted so late into the night, and why he felt pressured to stay involved when his instincts were telling him to leave. The more he explains, the colder the narrative becomes. His account is not dramatic. It is methodical. That restraint makes it heavier. He emphasizes that his discomfort was not sudden, but cumulative, building with every unexpected appearance and every interaction that made him feel like a background figure in someone else's story. As Funky lays out this tightened timeline, viewers begin to see why he feels the public was only given part of the picture. And with each detail he adds, the distance between what he says happened and what Tamar shared publicly grows wider, pushing the story closer to a breaking point that no longer feels accidental. Everything shifts the moment Funky reaches the car. His tone changes, not louder, not angrier, but sharper. Like someone choosing words carefully because he knows exactly what they will do once released. He explains that this was not a quiet ride, not an uneventful transition between locations, and not the passive scene many assumed. According to Funky, Tamar was not sitting alone or withdrawn. She was sitting on Mendeecees' lap, close enough that there was no room for interpretation. And he says they were kissing while he sat only inches away. That detail lands hard. It becomes the line that freezes timelines. The clip that gets cut, reposted, slowed down, and analyzed frame by frame. Funky describes how the moment confirmed the discomfort he had been feeling all night. It explained why he felt out of place, why the energy had felt closed off, and why he decided not to go upstairs when they were dropped off. He says he assumed they wanted privacy and chose to leave rather than insert himself into something that clearly did not involve him. That decision, small at the time, becomes massive in hindsight. The internet latches onto this moment because it reframes everything that came before it. Reaction channels replay his words repeatedly, isolating phrases, emphasizing the proximity, the intimacy, and the silence that followed. Commentators pause on his expression as he recalls it, noting that he does not embellish the moment, but does not soften it either. Tamar's earlier statements are pulled back into focus. Her claims of confusion now contrasted with Funky's certainty about what he witnessed. Viewers begin questioning how a night described publicly as a blur could contain such a clear, intimate interaction. The car incident becomes the centerpiece of the entire narrative because it introduces intent. It suggests awareness, and it raises doubts about what was omitted. Funky does not present it as revenge or exposure. He presents it as context that was missing. But once it enters the public conversation, it stops being just context. It becomes evidence in the court of public opinion. That single moment, described plainly and without theatrics, becomes the most replayed clip of the week, not because it is sensational, but because it changes the meaning of the night. From that point forward, nothing else in the story can be heard the same way again as Funky's account circulates. Attention shifts from the car incident to the growing list of contradictions that refuse to line up. Tamar publicly described waking up in a pool of blood and nearly dying. It's a statement that immediately alarmed viewers and set a severe tone around the night. Yet, Funky claims that when medical help was suggested, she declined an ambulance. That single detail becomes a pressure point in the narrative. To the internet, those two ideas feel difficult to reconcile. On one side, a life-threatening portrayal. On the other, a refusal of immediate care. At the same time, Tamar repeatedly states in interviews that she does not know what happened to her, that her memory cuts off after attending a friend's birthday gathering. Funky challenges that framing by pointing out how selective that memory appears. When placed beside moments he says were clear and deliberate, he recalls her interactions, her movement, and her awareness earlier in the night, contrasting sharply with her later claims of total uncertainty. Viewers begin scrutinizing how the story was presented publicly, noticing that key elements Funky mentions never appear in Tamar's initial version. The omissions stand out. The repeated presence of Mendeecees, the intimacy in the car, the reason Funky chose to leave, none of it is addressed. Instead, the public narrative centers on injury and confusion. Positioning Funky in the background of a crisis he insists he was not present for. Comment sections begin asking why clarification came slowly, why certain posts were edited or deleted, and why the framing shifted without explanation. Funky explains that he tried to encourage her to correct assumptions once the internet began drawing conclusions, and that she briefly did, only to remove it later. That deletion becomes another unanswered question. To viewers, each inconsistency adds weight. Not because it proves wrongdoing, but because it creates space for interpretation. Tamar's calm delivery clashes with the severity of her claims. Funky's detailed recollection clashes with her fragmented account. The result is a story where facts feel incomplete on both sides. But the gaps are far more visible in one narrative than the other. As these contradictions pile up, suspicion replaces confusion. The audience is no longer asking whether memories differ. They are asking why the story seems to change depending on who is telling it, and what was left unsaid that allowed the internet to fill in the rest. This is the point where silence stops being neutral and starts becoming combustible. As Tamar's explanations remain vague and certain posts quietly disappear, the internet begins constructing theories to explain what is not being said. Not because there is proof, but because there is absence. Viewers notice that clarifications are short-lived, that questions are left unanswered, and that the gaps between statements feel intentional rather than accidental. From there, speculation escalates quickly. Comment sections start introducing words that were never spoken in the interviews. Themselves, control, leverage, pressure, and eventually, pregnancy. None of these claims are supported by direct evidence. Funky does not say them. Tamar does not confirm them. Yet the theory spread anyway, driven by the same pattern repeating over and over. Silence followed by deletion. Vague framing followed by emotional distance. The internet treats omission as implication. When Tamar avoids elaborating on certain details, viewers interpret it as protection rather than confusion. When posts that briefly soften the narrative are removed, people ask why clarity would be erased unless it threatens something else. Content creators begin framing these ideas carefully, using phrases like "some believe" and "many are asking," but the effect is the same. The rumor becomes a character in the story. Pregnancy speculation, in particular, gains traction not because anyone claims it outright, but because it feels like an explanation that fits every inconsistency. It explains the emotional detachment. It explains the selective memory. It explains the reluctance to clarify publicly. Again, there is no confirmation. There is no statement. There is no transcript line that supports it. But the internet does not require proof to sustain a theory. It requires patterns. And viewers believe they see patterns everywhere. Funky's detailed timeline is now filtered through this lens. With audiences reinterpreting his discomfort and decision to leave his reactions to something deeper happening around him, Tamar's calm interview tone is reinterpreted as guarded rather than confused. Each omission becomes fuel. Each pause becomes suspicious. What began as analysis turns into narrative building, where speculation fills every unanswered question. The danger is not that these theories exist, but that they start sounding plausible simply through repetition. By the time the rumor reaches its peak, it is no longer presented as gossip, but as the missing piece that explains everything, even though it remains entirely unverified. And once that idea takes hold, the conversation shifts permanently, pulling the story into far darker territory than either interview ever intended. As the narrative hardens online, Funky finds himself cast into a role he insists he never occupied. It's the unspoken villain of a story he says he was barely part of. He explains that once Tamar's posts went live, the internet did not wait for timelines or context. It moved straight to judgment. Because they had been together earlier that night, eyes turned to him by default. Messages poured in. Comments accused. Live streams dissected his silence before he ever spoke. He describes logging on to see thousands of people already convinced he was responsible for something he says he did not witness and did not cause. The psychological toll becomes evident in the way he speaks about that period, not with rage, but with exhaustion. He recalls friends asking careful questions, strangers demanding answers, and the weight of knowing that no explanation would satisfy an audience that had already decided his role. Funky says the most damaging part was not the accusations themselves, but the way Tamar's silence allowed them to breathe. He claims that a single clear statement could have slowed the storm. But instead, ambiguity remained, and speculation filled the space. In the court of public opinion, uncertainty reads as guilt. Every pause became suspicious. Every delay became strategic. He describes feeling trapped in a narrative that was written without him, where his absence from the actual incident did not matter as much as his proximity to the person at the center of it. The internet, driven by emotion rather than sequence, collapsed the timeline into blame. Funky emphasizes that he was not there when anything allegedly happened, that he went home, that he did not go upstairs, and that his involvement ended before the night turned dark. Yet none of that stopped the pylon. He talks about being analyzed, misquoted, and turned into a symbol of wrongdoing by people who had never heard his full account. What surfaces most strongly is not defensiveness, but betrayal. He suggests that being left exposed to public anger hurt more than the rumors themselves. The experience reframes the entire story, shifting it from a disagreement over facts to a case study in how quickly online narratives can destroy reputations before evidence ever enters the conversation. And by the time Funky finally speaks in full, the damage is already done, proving how irreversible judgment becomes once the internet decides who to blame. The narrative takes a sharper, more unsettling turn the moment Funky drops a name he had avoided until now. Yandy, he does not elaborate. He does not dramatize it. He simply says that, in his view, only one person was truly hurt by everything that unfolded. That brief statement lands heavier than any accusation because it widens the scope of the story instantly. Until that moment, the focus had been locked on Tamar, Funky, and Mendeecees, a contained triangle defined by conflicting memories and public silence. Yandy's name introduces collateral damage. Someone who was not part of the interviews, not part of the live streams, and not part of the internet's early speculation, yet potentially bore the deepest emotional cost. Viewers immediately recognize the implication. If Yandy was hurt, then this was never just about a confusing night or a misinterpreted situation. It suggests consequences that extended beyond perception and into real relationships. Funky does not accuse her directly, but his phrasing implies awareness, as if he understands that the fallout reached someone who never asked to be in the center of the storm. The internet reacts instantly. Comment sections pivot. Timelines are redrawn. Theories expand. People begin revisiting earlier moments, reanalyzing interactions, proximity, and emotional cues, with Yandy now positioned as the unseen impact of everything that happened. The story shifts from personal confusion to relational damage. What once felt like speculation about memory now feels like a question of loyalty. Funky's restraint in this moment is what makes it powerful. He does not name actions. He names consequence. By saying Yandy was the one who suffered, he reframes the entire controversy as something larger than ego or reputation. It becomes about the ripple effect of silence, omission, and public framing. Viewers begin asking whether Tamar's choices, intentional or not, protected herself at the expense of someone else. Whether the narrative that unfolded online obscured harm done off-camera. The stakes rise immediately because emotional harm cannot be edited or deleted. It lingers. And by introducing Yandy without explanation, Funky leaves the internet with a haunting implication rather than a conclusion. That single name transforms the story into one about unseen victims, about the cost of unfinished truths, and about how narratives built in silence often leave the deepest wounds on those who never had a voice in the conversation. As the story continues to unfold, Tamar's persistent silence begins to feel less like hesitation and more like a deliberate strategy, a shield carefully positioned between herself and the prying eyes of the public. Every vague statement, every moment she refuses to elaborate, is scrutinized by viewers who read meaning into absence rather than presence. Audiences begin interpreting her avoidance as intentional, a form of control over what is revealed and what is left to speculation. Funky's detailed recounting of the night highlights the contrast: his willingness to lay out events, step by step, versus her sparse, detached delivery, which amplifies the sense that something critical is being withheld. Commenters speculate endlessly, asking why she would choose to leave questions unanswered if there were nothing to hide. Each deleted post, each erased clarification becomes evidence to them. A signal that something deeply personal is being protected rather than a simple oversight. The internet begins to treat her omissions as a deliberate act of safeguarding sensitive information, with the most extreme interpretations pointing to the possibility of a pregnancy or another life-altering secret. Viewers dissect every nuance, her tone, her timing, her body language, and the sequence of events she chooses to acknowledge. Funky's frustration, communicated through his detailed and precise timeline, becomes a lens through which this silence is magnified. He repeatedly notes that the internet could have seen the story differently had she clarified, and the gap between their narratives allows speculation to flourish unchecked. What might have been minor inconsistencies escalate into perceived intentional concealment. As discussions spiral online, the pattern of her behavior, selective memory, emotional distance, and avoidance of crucial details feeds the belief that the silence is protective, a way to guard something too sensitive to disclose publicly. Viewers debate whether she is shielding herself from judgment, someone else from exposure, or an emotional truth too complex to share. The effect is a heightened tension that pervades the narrative, making every omission feel loaded with significance. By the end of this section, the audience is no longer just watching a story unfold. They are actively interpreting motives, filling in gaps, and constructing a hidden layer of the narrative. Tamar's silence ceases to be neutral. It becomes a character in its own right, shaping perception, fueling speculation, and suggesting that what is left unsaid may be the most consequential part of the entire controversy.